Hey, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. Happy Wednesday. And welcome to Wisdom Wednesdays, spinoff and a installment of our community at Steps and Stages, where we want to make sure that we are doing what our practice says and making sure that the work we're doing has good in it for others. And so we're here tonight on Steps and Stages, and it is May, which is also Mental Health Awareness Month. And so tonight I thought it would be interesting to have a conversation with not just me, but with one of our clients who is a therapist. She is Juanisha Hicks, and she has actually gone through each stage of our community, from vision building to life mastery to into your genius, and is now a part of the Steps and Stages Mastermind. And I want to bring Juanisha on tonight and talk about mental health in a way that allows us also to talk about mental hygiene and how we keep our minds focused so that our lives can be exactly what we need it to be. And when it's not, we have the resilience and the tenacity and the capacity to actually handle it and persevere. So tonight, I want to remind you that as we're live on LinkedIn and Facebook and our YouTube channel, that you should feel free to drop any comments below, and we'll be able to answer your questions. And without further ado, I want to bring Juanisha Hicks to our stream. Hey, welcome, Juanisha.
Hey.
How are you? How are you?
I'm good. Good. Glad to be here.
Listen, thanks for joining us. You and I have had this conversation before, right? Like, a lot of people are wondering, where is the intersection of coaching and therapy? And, I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking, therapy is about excavation and coaching is about navigation. Right. And so as we're in Mental Health Awareness Month, I just want to check in with you. Like, what is your personal connection to how your intelligence work and how this coaching work dovetails? But also, like, what is your definition of mental health?
Yeah, that's that's a really good question. I really love the part about excavation versus, navigation. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that I said when we met in the large client meeting, was that the work that I do, again, there is this overlap, but still the paths are somewhat different. And I find that for me, good mental health is having a balance of all the things. So even in the Steps and Stages community, we talk about these 4 quadrants, right? Like, what's happening in your vocari, like what's happening in your love and relationships, what's happening in your health and wellness, and money, time, freedom. And so to me, good mental health is a balance of all those things. But of course, it's important to know what's in those things. Like, what is important to me? Where are my values in those particular areas? And do I have a good balance, or at least do I have a plan for balance in those areas? And so I think if you have that, you have a good balanced community, people, a couple of people at least who you can count on, a way in which you're managing and planning for your sort of like financial freedom and stability. What's your health? What are your health goals looking like? Right. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're hitting the gym every day, but are you drinking your water? Right. You always tell us, like, every time we meet, make sure you have some water. And I was like, my glass is almost empty.
Right. But you're bringing up an interesting point, Juanisha, where, like, when we talk about balance, I'm always like, well, balance is not 50-50. It's 90-10, it's 95-5. And I'm wondering, a lot of times when we are working on our mental health, or we feel dis-ease in our mental body, in our mental kinesphere, right? Like, what does it mean to feel out of balance? But also, what does it mean to negotiate balance?
I think it goes back to, I think, values. To me, right? It goes back to values. Like, what is it that you're trying to do? What do you believe in? And what is it that you want to be demonstrating in the way you create this kind of a balance? Yeah. So to me, it means knowing what those important components are, and figuring out, like, do I have them, and balancing. For me in particular, through our work, right, I can always balance up against, like, is it what makes me happy? Like, do I have more joy in my life? Is what I'm doing or how I'm living my life, like, is it helpful to other people and to myself, right? So I think trying to figure out, like, what are the key components to like what I need in my life, and then how does it manifest itself around my community, and making sure that, you know, everybody's benefiting somewhat from what it is that I'm doing.
Right, right, right. You know, I think it's interesting, right? Because our internal values and then what we value externally can often be in conflict, right? And because I see so many clients at different stages of their own personal evolution, I'm often really struck by that disconnect, and that mental dis-ease comes from a pushing up against the values that were embedded early, and then the values that now feel important, right? How do you negotiate like the personal, the external, the professional, and how does that tie into the balance of mental health?
You know, for me, when you talk about things that were embedded, I think about like what we were taught, like
Mm-hmm.
how and what we taught in our families. What did our parents, what things that our parents teach us were important to them, and
Yeah.
how we had to sort of carry that forward and say, oh, well, this is really important to my mother, my father, my grandmother, so I have to do this thing. I have to I think a good example is, you know, every time I see aunts and uncles, like everybody gets a hug and a kiss, right? And what we're starting to learn is that sometimes children are not comfortable doing that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even though you keep moving through, like, I have to hug and kiss everybody, you may not feel comfortable with either somebody touching you, period, but a particular person. But
Right,
that's what you think you're supposed to do. So you
right.
do that, right? You look a particular kind of way, you do your hair a certain kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about, so if you maybe come from a particular cultural experience, you may talk about, oh, we do this like this, or, you know, we have I don't
Yeah.
know, pig's feet or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you get older, you're like, oh, I don't think I want to eat that anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, I think what is important is figuring out, like, looking back and seeing, well, what are the things of the past that I do value,
Yeah.
right, and that are important to me. And sometimes it may even be things that kind of rub up against some of your new values, and in the things that you have newly learned that you either like or don't like, or want to do or no longer want to do, and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out, how do I bridge the gap there. Really, I think it has to do with, is what I'm keeping still keeping me in line with my integrity,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So am I doing the things I want to be doing, regardless of if anybody is around, or if anybody sees me,
Right.
or if it's
Right.
just me and my puppy, right? Like, am
Yeah.
I being who I want to be? And I think professionally, that becomes challenging too, in many ways, because even in my current work situation, there may be things, decisions that were made and I may have agreed with 6 years ago. And
Yeah.
as I'm growing and changing, I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what? I am, to be frank, balance it up against the 5 questions of like, is there good in it for others? I'm not so
Right.
sure there is anymore.
Yeah.
Is this giving me more life? You know, am I happy to do it? Am I happy to tell people this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're not, a lot of times there is that sort of rubbing and that friction. And to me, that friction is a message.
Yeah.
The message is, take a deeper look, right?
Right.
Ask
Right.
some more questions, maybe get some input from outside,
Mm-hmm.
and then coming back and reflected. When I look in the mirror, am I happy with what I'm seeing and what I'm doing?
Yeah. You know, that's interesting because we were just with the Life Mastery group last night. And for those of you who some of this lingo may sound a little unfamiliar, we have 4 stages of our community: Vision Builder, Life Mastery, Into Your Genius, and Juanisha's level, which is the mastermind. So we were just talking to the Life Mastery group last night, and we're in this month talking about health. And we got to the point where we break down the HEAL and the suffix, the TH, right? And so the TH, for those of you who don't know, I love words. I'm a professor by trade, right? Like, so the TH basically indicates that this is a condition of something, right? And so health is the perpetual condition of healing. And so I think many of us sometimes miss it because we think, oh, we're working on our health, and when it gets to a certain level, we are healthy, right? But if we go back and talk about the condition of healing, we can be healthy on the outside without being healed on the inside, right? And so a lot of what I hear you talking about, Juanisha, is that alignment, but also that friction. And I think that friction is where most of us then try to seek help or guidance, right? But that navigation piece is always so interesting, especially when we're talking about our past, right? I mean, I grew up in the era where people were like, oh, you want to cry? I'll give you something to cry about, right? And then would proceed to whoop you, right? Like, so it's like, well, there's a lot to cry about now, but like, I guess I can't, I shouldn't, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And, like, so even those like emotional barriers or the emotional scar tissue, the emotional armor we get used to wearing for other people continues to play itself out in the world, in our professions, right? In the clothing that we wear, in the procedures that we follow. Like, we're really just armoring ourselves to keep from being hurt.
Yeah.
So when we think about armor, when we think about the beginning of the healing process on the way to good mental health, what do you think some of the most prevalent pieces of armor are that people are wearing now?
I think one prevalent piece of armor that people are wearing is like defensism, right? Like being on the defense, like ready to sort of fight.
Yeah.
Even if it is, articulate way of fighting, right? But like really kind of having that barrier up because I was hurt in the past and I'm not really sure where you coming from. So
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm ready on, it's almost like it's offensive in a way as well.
Yeah.
But just sort of being kind of like, geared to fight back and to push back and not let things in. I think another one is sort of related to me, but like anger, frustrations, right? So, being angry and addressing everything with some flair of anger to it. And I think another thing is it kind of, you had mentioned this in one of your videos, you talked about knowing it all, right? Don't think, why are we acting like we know it all, right? So having to kind of this facade of already knowing a thing, right? So that I don't have to let my guard down, I don't have to be vulnerable, right? I don't have to trust. So I think those are some key things that you see. And I guess the last thing I would say is this self-deprecating humor.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm gonna make a really negative joke about myself before anybody else can, and I'm gonna say some sort of self-deprecating thing that I think because of social media to some degree, and like reels and TikToks and those things are great, but I think sometimes people can utilize those things to make fun of themselves.
Right. When they're really not addressing the thing they want to actually better themselves in, right? Like, so let me make fun of the thing that I'm not actually going to work on because I'm afraid that I might fail if I try to be better. But if I tell you that I'm never going to try to be better than any growth I have, you'll applaud it.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, it's such a cyclical thing, right? And I mean, I'm a coach, not a therapist, right? And so you know this, but I tell people all the time, do not go into your mind alone. It's a battlefield. Right? Like, if you get stuck in there with all the things that your subconscious has been holding on to for your entire life and keeping score, and you don't know where to put them and there's no categories, then you don't stand a chance.
That's right. That's right.
I mean,
and that's why I love the, navigation versus the excavation, because I think as you are sort of like going along, trying to follow the path, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Sometimes you hit up against this barrier that is sort of like something under the ground that you got to kind of dig at a little bit, like, a blackhead or something, got to get at it. And that's where I think the overlap with therapy comes in, right? That you need that, other support, right? That other person in there digging with you, like spelunking with that little light on, being like, what's happening? What else is there? And then it lifts you up again and you see more light, and then you can keep, moving through your navigation system.
Right. And, it hit me today that, we do get defensive about so many things, right, that are out of our control because we want to be able to have some level of control.
Yeah.
Right. And this is not a political statement or anything like that. And I know that there are systems of oppression and systems in this country that don't work, but I also know systems do not run without belief. Right? Absolutely. And so when we're talking about being mentally healthy, we have to question and like undo what it is we actually believe in.
That's right.
Right. And so this belief this balance and this navigation, I mean, I feel like are core to mental health. What do you think?
I agree. I agree 100%. I think that's true. I think that we don't always know, what it is. And in order to sort of look at that, I think you do need some sort of another system helping you move through it so that you have the tools to figure out like, oh, how do I know if this is a problem? Or how do I know when I'm too far in and I need to kind of like throw a line back and get a little bit of support, either getting pulled out or getting pulled through. Right.
Yeah. And what are the clues? I mean, I think I'm not saying that this is like common knowledge, right? Like everybody knows you do this work. I do this work on a daily basis, right? Like I'm always looking for the next tool, but I do believe that the tools are sometimes a defense mechanism. People are like, oh, I know that, or I did that, right? And my coach tells me like the 3 most dangerous words in the world are I know that.
Yeah.
Right. And because you can know it and not do anything about it.
I was getting ready to say, I think the remedy to I know that is I'm doing that, right? Yes. Like, so I can know a thing, but am I moving through the thing, or am I just holding this knowledge like, oh, I know the thing. Okay, right. You know the thing, but what does it cause you to do?
Yeah.
Right? Does it cause you to do something? Does it cause you to be a certain kind of way? To me, I think that's the remedy to that, Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Because also, if we're in our mind by ourselves, right, and we know all of these things that we're not doing, then we actually start putting ourselves on trial, right, as not being capable of healing ourselves. And no one heals themselves alone.
Yeah.
Right. Even the people on Naked and Afraid need their partner there. Like, come on, y'all.
That's right. I was just looking at that.
Nobody is meant to do this alone, right? Like, which is one of the reasons like we started bringing in communities at a time, cohorts at a time into steps and stages to make sure that people weren't trying to get this information and implement on their own. The whole idea of self-help, I think, is one of the biggest misnomers that we've ever put out as an industry.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think, to your point, it gives you the idea that like I can be here and I have the book and I'm reading and I know that, and okay, right? But there's very little to be accountable for, and not many people to be accountable with, right? Together, so with, not to, but with,
right?
Like who am I doing this with and moving through this with? So I know this information. I mean, even in steps and stages, we some of us have kind of broken off a little bit and said, okay, we need to come together in between these meetings to say, okay, what did you get? What did you get? Like, okay, I had it written down, but what is it? What does it mean? What do I do? Right. So not just I know that. And I can run down the 5 questions. I can tell you about the quadrants. What am I doing? Who am I being in the thing? So I think, I would agree with that a lot.
Yeah.
We even have people who, when we met, they said, I have my whole bookshelf is full of self-help books. And I'm like, oh yeah, but we're all still here together.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And like, we're all guilty, right? We are in a consumeristic society. So even consuming information becomes the next thing, right? Y'all have heard me say this before. We've been in a pandemic and an infodemic, to the point where people are absorbing passive information and getting overly fed with information without instruction and being bewildered by insecurity. Right?
Yep.
Like, insecurity is one of those things where it's actually the opposite of health in any form, right? Because you brought this up earlier. You were talking about balance and stability, right? And insecurity is being unstable, right? In some area or another. And so I wonder, when people think about stability, or when you think about stability, what could be the most stable thing that you can think of that actually leads to health?
I think one of the most stable things that can lead to health really is awareness, right? Yeah. I think awareness paired with practice, right? Because again, awareness can be tagged onto the I know that already, right? But I think knowing a thing and then doing something about it, right? Having a plan to do the thing and then doing the thing. And then around having people that help you do that, that know what you're doing, know what you're planning, what you're trying to do. So I read this book. It said, I'm going to say these affirmations. Here's how I plan to say them. I plan to say them this many times on these days. I'm starting Monday. Can you check in with me on Tuesday to make sure I did that? So I think because we are, we're made to be communal on some level, right? Even an introverted person or someone who may have difficulties leaving their homes is trying to communicate and connect in some way.
Right,
so
right.
Part of that stability is not being alone, right? Like there is no stool where you sit on where there's just one
leg
thing, right? You got these three legs.
Right.
I think it's you, your plan, your plan, your God, your spiritual thing, and some other people kind of helping you navigate through it.
Right.
When I think of stability, I think of that.
Yeah. Juanita, there's a question in the chat, and it's from Chris Cummings. It says, why is mental health such a stigma in the Black community, especially with Black men? Right. And I don't know your clientele, but I am going to talk just for a second. I'm not Chris. I'm the coach. She's a therapist. Right. So I just want to call a thing. Right. But from my experience, right, when we talk about our past and how we have to excavate the past to actually know our own value system within what we're building as health and healing, then we know that historically, in America, the system of racism has said that people of color, specifically African Americans, Black people, have a different pain tolerance than most people or than our white counterparts, right? And that has been said so much, it's been documented in health and medical magazines, like medical papers, right? And so when we get to the idea of mental health, which really has been the saving grace of our lineage as African Americans in this country, the mental, spiritual component to keep the body fed, to keep the soul cared for, to keep the family together, to keep enduring such degradation, then we have to be really clear, right? Like that the stigma has been internalized the same way that racism has been internalized. And so when we believe we can't be strong enough, when we think we're not stable, then it starts to create a mental dis-ease, and challenging that stereotype and challenging that embedded hierarchy of value has to be something that we do as a community without stigmatizing it. But I think the stigma comes when we actually believe that we are somehow weaker or less than because we need to be in communion with each other on a therapeutic way. But you're the therapist.
I'm not so sure I could have said it better. I think that has a lot. I think that has a lot to do with it. This idea again that we have also internalized about how we move through the world and what we have to do to move through the world. Yeah. Right. And I think there's so many places in which that is the case, where you feel like you have to be twice as good, work twice as hard for twice as long, or 3 times as long and hard. Yeah. And I think if you allow yourself, coming into therapy is really an exercise in courage and vulnerability. And Crystal, you said multiple times, if your doctor don't have a doctor and your coach don't have a coach and your therapist don't have a therapist, ask a question. Yeah. Your therapist has a therapist, right? I have multiple times gone and sat in front of a therapist and been like, right. So here's the deal. How can you help? Like, what's going on? Right. And it is, I have to say, it's not easy to go in, be on the other side of the couch, so to speak. But what I know is that is, a value for me around integrity, right? Like I cannot sit with a client and ask them to do something I'm not willing to do myself. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But I think that it has a lot to do with the history of our people in this country. Yeah. And vulnerability. Yeah. And I'm just going to make sure that we're answering your question, Chris, right? Black men specifically, and we what I'll do is
on these Wisdom Wednesdays, we'll invite another colleague, right? Let's invite a Black man therapist. Let's shout out to Dr. Kurt. Get ready, right? Like, just let's think about this in terms of, again, breaking down the strength of someone, right? And that comes from the inside. I was literally listening to NPR today, and there's a new book coming out about George Floyd, and it actually does an intimate detail about how his upbringing from the time he was in second grade to his death was about how he kept hope in the system, but the system continued to not see him as the gentle giant that he was on the inside, but really through athletics in high school, all of these things, that he never met the mark that was the strong Black man, right? So when we don't see that portrayed in the external, then we have a problem. It's like a cognitive dissonance. Like, we can't even imagine that Black women are not strong. We can't even imagine that Black men can't handle it or not aggressive on the football field. We can't even imagine, right? And one of the books that I used to read my son early on was Ferdinand.
Oh yeah.
Right? The big bull who just likes to sit and sniff the flowers, right? Like, we miss that, right? We miss that opportunity to choose. And, we said this in our last Wisdom Wednesdays, but managing the power of choice is really one of those essences of the human experience, and choosing to ask people, right, for help, choosing to be vulnerable enough to let someone inside your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say one quick thing also is I'm glad that you mentioned that, Crystal, about bringing someone on who is male, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the other thing that happens in our community is we think we can speak for each other.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
I want to say everything that we just said, I believe to be true. And I've heard from Black men. However, I'm not a Black man. Right. And I think that's another thing we have to be mindful of is I'm not a Black man. Right. Like, I can't exactly tell you what that experience is like. I can only tell you that up against, having been with a Black man, what I mean? So I think it's real important for us to also have someone who actually can speak from that perspective. I love that question. And I also just want to, give honor where honor is due, right? Like, that's not really what I do.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Because understanding comes after experience. And I've never had that experience. I've had some experiences, but it hasn't been that one.
Yeah.
Right. And so, as we kind of wrap this up, we don't want to hold y'all too long, but really just the idea of continual healing is going to lead you to mental health, right? Healing and growth are two things that we never stop doing. And we can ignore them. We can ignore the signs that we need to grow in a certain area, but all it does is actually stagnate us in another area. We get stuck somewhere else, right? That idea of health is that the energy around you and inside of you is flowing. And at some point, those two things intersect. And when they intersect, it can cause a growth or it can cause friction. And both of those things can also be the same thing, because it takes the same tools to build success as it does failure. And those tools are built with choices. So what I want everybody here to do who's been listening to this, who's watching the replay, is to really just be honest about what you need. Because filling the gap and beginning the healing process is about knowing what you need and then asking for the help without any type of shame or remorse or even expectation, because all of our healing looks individually different, right? And the work is very different for all of us. Juanisha, I'm just going to ask you, as we close out, give us your last words on this topic for tonight, because we know this is an ongoing conversation. And then just tell us, why you decided to invest in coaching, especially what we do here at Steps and Stages in terms of your vision, when you already had all the other tools.
Yeah. Well, so my final words for tonight are that just to echo really, Crystal, what you said, is that I think that I even did a live video a couple of days ago about mental health, and just saying, people have some misunderstandings about what it means. But really, I do think it just means taking care of yourself and not going in there alone. Yeah. Right. And then when you are in there, that you throw a line out so that somebody can reach in and grab you out if you need that support. really trying not to be ashamed or embarrassed, even though that lives there, but maybe even trying to put that to the side for a bit so you can really figure out what is it that I need and how can I get it. Ask for help, be willing to accept help. Understand that people are going to help in the way that they know best, and sometimes that's not going to match up with what you need, right? But give them some grace, right?
Bless their heart. Bless their heart.
That's right. Bless their heart. You want to, assume positive intent as much as possible. And for me, I think, again, it comes back to this idea of excavation versus navigation, right? And so, like I said, I've done a number of years, as a therapist, in therapy, before I was a therapist, working through some past family stuff, as most people do. And what I realized is that it was a lot of self-help kind of given out, right? Like it was like, here's a self-help thing, let me give it to you, you do it. And this process is very different because it is very effectual as a navigation system, right? Like here's the path forward. You can make the left turn or the right turn as you see fit, right? However, when you come back, there's always going to be this like pathway kind of laid out for you of how to move forward in a doing kind of way, not just the thinking, I'm pondering, but like, oh, you know what? I actually know what to do with some of those ponderings. Here's how I can do it. Here's some steps that I can take, very clearly written out steps and tools. And then the support really, I don't know about other coaches, but the support that you offer is, really hands down some of the most readily available help that I think I've been able to get, with regard to my vision. There's a couple of pieces to it, right? But definitely feeling like I can go in and say, I want to be a mom. I want to work on my own. I want to have this kind of house like this, and having somebody say to me, just think about that. Envision that. What does your house look like? How many rooms are there? Oh, what's in those rooms? Are there flowers there? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. Well, figure it out. Do you want flowers in every room? Oh, right. Flowers. Yes. No, I actually don't want flowers. I want oil diffusers. Okay. Well, then you can have that.
Right. You can have it.
You can have whatever you want. And I think one of my other cousins said this, like, when I realized that I could design what I wanted and I didn't have to just wait around for something to happen, that I could actually make that happen with support in a scaffolding system, I was sold. I'm like, all right. All right. This is what I need. I need this. It's more active. It's much more active.
Yeah. Well, listen, Juanisha, thank you so much for continuing to invest in this community, not just with your vision, but in this, right? Like, our community is pretty solid and we got some amazing people in there. If you're thinking about creating a life you love, jump over to stepwithcrystal.com, schedule your complimentary vision call, and listen, it only takes one decision to make one step in the next right direction. Hey, love you guys. Take care of yourself. Don't do any harm. In the words of Dr. Curtis Jasper, who will be here sometime soon, right, Dr. Kurt? Yeah, just an invitation. Yeah. We don't, no pressure now that we've said this to the world, no pressure. But we'll see you next week for Wisdom Wednesdays, y'all. Have an amazing evening. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thank you, Juanisha. Always a pleasure. Good night, y'all.